I was standing in the hallway of my daughter's apartment building, balancing 2 coffees in a cardboard tray, when I noticed her door wasn't quite closed. Through the narrow gap, I could see straight into the mirror hanging on the opposite wall. The reflection showed my husband of 35 years, Gregory, with his arms around my daughter's roommate, Vanessa. They were kissing. Not a peck, not a friendly gesture. A kiss that told a story I didn't want to read. I stood there, frozen. The coffees in my hands started to tremble. I'd driven 2 hours from our house in Kingston to surprise my daughter Melissa for her birthday weekend. I'd texted her I was running late, that I'd stop by Saturday morning instead of Friday night. But I'd made better time than expected and decided to surprise her early with her favorite vanilla latte. The surprise was mine. I stepped back from the door, my mind racing. Vanessa was 28. I was 63. Gregory was 65. Vanessa had been Melissa's roommate for almost 3 years. She'd been to our house for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, for long weekends. She'd sat at my table. She'd called me Mrs. Patterson, then later, when she said she felt like family, she'd called me Helen. I walked back down the hallway, got in my car, and sat there. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't get the key in the ignition. I finally managed it and drove to a Tim Hortons 3 blocks away. I sat in the parking lot, staring at the brick wall in front of me. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But I knew it was. I pulled out my phone and texted Melissa. Running even later than I thought. Honey, probably won't make it until this afternoon. Save some birthday energy for your old mom. She texted back immediately. No worries, Mom. Vanessa and I are just hanging out. Dad's at the golf course, right? I stared at that message. Dad's at the golf course, right? Gregory had told me he was golfing with his buddy Richard today. He'd left the house at 7 this morning, kissed me on the forehead, told me to have fun with Melissa, and said he'd see me Sunday evening when I got home. But he wasn't at the golf course. He was in Toronto, in my daughter's apartment, with Vanessa. I sat in that parking lot for an hour, drinking coffee that had gone cold, trying to piece together how long this had been happening. When had it started? How had I missed it? Then I remembered something. 6 months ago, Gregory had suddenly become interested in helping Melissa move some furniture. He'd driven to Toronto on a Tuesday, said he'd stay overnight and drive back Wednesday. Melissa had mentioned Vanessa would be there to help. I thought it was nice that he was being a helpful dad. 3 months ago, he'd gone to Toronto for a medical appointment with a specialist. He'd said it was nothing serious, just a consultation about his knee. He'd stayed overnight because the appointment was early morning. I'd offered to come with him. He'd insisted I didn't need to miss work for something minor. Last month, he'd had dinner meetings, 3 of them, all in Toronto, all overnight stays. Gregory was a semi-retired engineer. He did some consulting work, but nothing that required regular trips to Toronto. I felt sick. I drove to a hotel and checked in. I told the front desk I needed a quiet room to work. I sat on the bed and opened my laptop. I started looking through our credit card statements. I had access to everything. We'd always kept our finances transparent, or so I thought. The charges were there, scattered but consistent. Restaurants in Toronto that Gregory had never mentioned. A boutique hotel in the Distillery District. Flowers from a shop near Melissa's apartment. A jewelry purchase from Burke's. I'd never received flowers or jewelry. I kept digging. I found a Visa card I didn't recognize under Gregory's name, linked to an email address I'd never seen before. It took me 3 hours and a phone call to the bank pretending to be confused about which card was which to get access to those statements. The evidence was crushing. Monthly charges to the same hotel, dinner reservations for 2 at expensive restaurants, purchases from lingerie boutiques, a weekend getaway to Niagara Falls in September, when Gregory had told me he was at a consulting conference in Ottawa. And then I found something that made my hands go numb. A property tax bill, forwarded to our home address for a condo in Toronto, in the Liberty Village neighborhood, the same neighborhood where Melissa lived. Gregory had bought a condo in Toronto and never told me. I called the property tax office, again playing confused. Yes, they confirmed. The property was purchased 8 months ago in Gregory Patterson's name only. It was a 1-bedroom unit. I sat there on that hotel bed, staring at the tax document on my laptop screen, and something inside me went very cold and very clear. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to call Gregory and have a hysterical confrontation. I was going to gather every piece of evidence I could find, and then I was going to make a decision about what to do with it. I spent the entire weekend in that hotel room. I didn't go to Melissa's. I texted her that I'd caught a stomach bug and didn't want to give it to her on her birthday. I promised we'd celebrate the following weekend. She sent worried messages and offered to bring me soup. I told her to enjoy her day. While Melissa was celebrating with her friends and God, I hoped Vanessa wasn't there. I hoped she had the decency to stay away. I was building a file. I downloaded 7 months of credit card statements. I took screenshots of the hotel charges, the restaurant bills, the jewelry purchase. I requested the property records for the Toronto condo and paid the fee for expedited processing. I went through Gregory's emails, we'd always known each other's passwords, and found a folder labeled Project Consulting Toronto. The emails inside had nothing to do with consulting. They were love letters. Gregory had written to Vanessa about their future together, about how they'd wait until the time was right, about how she was the light of his life, how being with her made him feel young again, how they'd be together properly soon, once he'd figured out the finances. Vanessa had written back about how much she loved him, how hard it was to keep their secret, how she couldn't wait until they didn't have to hide anymore, how she knew it was complicated because of Melissa, but love was worth fighting for. There was an email from 3 weeks ago where Gregory detailed a timeline. He wanted to wait until after the holidays, didn't want to ruin Christmas, and then he'd tell me he wanted a separation in January. He'd offer me the house, a generous settlement, and ask for a quiet, amicable divorce. He'd frame it as growing apart, as wanting different things in retirement. The email ended with, "Just a few more months, my darling, and then we can stop pretending." I read that email 3 times, sitting on that hotel bed, and I felt something I'd never felt before in my life. It wasn't rage, it wasn't heartbreak, it was a cold, surgical clarity. Gregory thought he was going to control the narrative. He thought he was going to surprise me in January with his carefully planned separation speech. He thought he'd get to leave on his terms, with his dignity intact, with everyone thinking we'd simply drifted apart. He was wrong. I drove back to Kingston on Sunday evening, just as I'd planned. Gregory was already home, watching television in the living room. He looked up when I came in, smiled, and asked how Melissa's birthday weekend had been. "It was lovely," I said. "We had a wonderful time." He nodded, turned back to the TV. "Good, good. I had a great round of golf yesterday. Shot an 83. I went upstairs and unpacked my bag. I took a shower, put on my pajamas, and got into bed beside my husband of 35 years. He was already asleep. I lay there in the dark, thinking about December, thinking about the fact that Gregory wanted to wait until after Christmas to blow up our lives. But Christmas was my favorite time of year, and this year we were hosting. Every year I hosted a Christmas dinner for our extended family. Both my sisters and their families, Gregory's brother and his wife, Melissa and whoever she was dating, and usually a few close friends. This year, the guest list was 32 people. I'd already sent the invitations, I'd already started planning the menu, and I'd invited Vanessa. She'd responded 2 weeks ago. "I'd love to come. Thank you for including me, Helen. You always make me feel like family." I smiled in the dark. Oh, Vanessa would absolutely be there for Christmas dinner. I'd make sure of it. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Patricia Chen. I'd known Patricia for 20 years. We served on a hospital fundraising committee together. I told her I needed to discuss something confidential and sensitive. She cleared time that afternoon. I brought everything. The printouts, the screenshots, the property records. I laid it all out on her desk. Patricia looked through the documents, her expression getting darker. Finally, she looked up at me. "Helen, I'm so sorry. This is a lot. I need to know what I'm entitled to," I said. "I need to know what happens to the Toronto condo, what happens to our house, what the settlement would look like." Patricia spent the next hour walking me through Ontario family law. The house would likely be split. The condo, purchased during the marriage with marital funds, would be part of the division of assets. Gregory's pension, our savings, all of it would be calculated and divided. But Helen, Patricia said carefully, the affair itself doesn't really change the financial outcome. Ontario has no-fault divorce. Him cheating with Vanessa doesn't mean he loses his rights to marital assets. I understand, I said, but it does mean something, doesn't it? For custody decisions if there were young children involved, for spousal support calculations, for the narrative, Patricia finished. Yes, it matters for how this is perceived. For your family, your community. That's what I thought, I said. I left Patricia's office with a clear plan. She'd begin preparing the divorce paperwork, but we wouldn't file yet. We'd wait. We'd let Gregory think he was in control. And then, at Christmas dinner, in front of his brother, my sisters, our friends, and our daughter, I'd show everyone exactly what kind of man Gregory Patterson really was. The next 6 weeks were the strangest of my life. I went through the motions of normalcy. I made dinner. I did laundry. I asked Gregory about his day. I discussed Christmas plans, who was bringing what time everyone should arrive, whether we should have turkey or ham or both. Gregory participated in all of it with enthusiasm. He helped me put up the Christmas tree. He wrapped presents. He kissed me goodnight and told me he loved me. And the whole time, I knew he was counting down the days until January, when he'd tell me he was leaving, when he'd move to his Toronto condo with Vanessa, when he'd start his new life. I checked his email regularly. He was still writing to Vanessa, still making plans, still talking about their future. In one email, he wrote, "Christmas will be bittersweet this year, our last holiday together before the truth comes out. But I'll get through it knowing that next Christmas, you and I will be together properly, starting our new traditions." I took a screenshot and added it to my file. On December 20th, I confirmed with Vanessa that she'd be attending Christmas dinner. She messaged back enthusiastically, "Absolutely, I'm looking forward to it. Should I bring wine?" I wrote back, "Just bring yourself. That's all we need." On December 22nd, my daughter called to ask if she could bring her new boyfriend to dinner. "I know we usually keep it family," she said, "but Trevor really wants to meet everyone and Vanessa's coming, so I thought maybe." "Of course," I said. "Bring Trevor. The more the merrier." On Christmas Eve, I wrapped the final presents and placed them under the tree. I wrapped one for Gregory, a beautiful watch I'd purchased months ago before I knew. I wrapped one for Vanessa, a picture frame with a photo of her and Melissa from last summer, laughing on the back deck of our house. Gregory came up behind me and put his arms around me. "This is going to be a great Christmas," he said. "Yes," I said, "it really is." Christmas morning arrived. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine. I'd been up since 5 preparing. Turkey in the oven, potatoes peeled and ready, pies cooling on the counter, everything perfect. Guests started arriving at 3. My sister Caroline and her husband Tom, my sister Jennifer with her 3 kids and their families, Gregory's brother Martin and his wife Susan, friends from the neighborhood. Melissa and Trevor arrived at 4, Vanessa trailing behind them. Vanessa hugged me at the door. "Merry Christmas, Helen. The house looks beautiful." "Thank you, dear," I said, hugging her back. "I'm so glad you could come." I watched Gregory's face when Vanessa walked in. There was a flicker of something surprise, anxiety, but he covered it quickly. He shook Trevor's hand, welcomed Vanessa, played the gracious host. Dinner was at 5:30. I'd set up the dining room table and extended it into the living room, creating one long surface that sat everyone. I'd spent hours on the place cards, making sure everyone was positioned perfectly. I put Gregory at the head of the table, where he always sat. I put myself at the other end. I put Vanessa directly across from Melissa, in Gregory's line of sight. I put Martin, Gregory's brother, right next to Gregory. We said Grace Gregory did the honors, as always. We passed the food. Everyone laughed and talked and filled their plates. The turkey was perfect. The wine was flowing. It was, by all appearances, a beautiful family Christmas. I waited until dessert had been served, until everyone had pie or cake in front of them, until the conversation had that warm, settled quality of a meal well enjoyed. Then I stood up and tapped my wine glass with a spoon. "Everyone," I said, if I could have your attention for just a moment." The table quieted. Faces turned toward me, smiling and expectant. Gregory looked up from his pie, looking mildly curious about what toast or sentimental speech I was about to make. "I want to thank you all for being here," I said. "Family means everything to me. Honesty means everything to me, and I've always believed that the people we love deserve to know the truth." Gregory's expression shifted slightly, confused but not alarmed yet. I reached under the table where I'd hidden a manila folder taped to the underside. I pulled it out and opened it. "Gregory," I said, my voice clear and steady, "I want to thank you for 35 years of marriage. And I want to thank Vanessa for opening my eyes to who you really are." The table went silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the hardwood floor. I pulled out the first document. "These are credit card statements showing regular hotel stays in Toronto at the same boutique hotel every 2 to 3 weeks for the past 7 months." I placed them on the table in front of me where everyone could see. Gregory's face drained of color. "Helen, what are you?" I pulled out the next set. These are email exchanges between Gregory and Vanessa, detailing their affair and their plans for a future together once Gregory divorced me in January. Vanessa made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Melissa's face was frozen in shock, looking between her roommate and her father. I pulled out the property records. "This is documentation showing that Gregory purchased a 1-bedroom condo in Toronto 8 months ago, without my knowledge, using marital funds, presumably as a love nest for him and Vanessa." I looked directly at Gregory, who was half standing now, his face red, his mouth opening and closing without sound. "You were going to tell me after Christmas," I said. "You wrote to Vanessa that you wanted to wait until after the holidays so you wouldn't ruin Christmas. You were going to frame it as us growing apart. You were going to control the narrative." I placed the final document on the table. "This is the divorce petition my lawyer has prepared. It details every asset, every property, every penny. You don't get to control the narrative, Gregory. You don't get to leave on your terms." The table erupted. Martin was standing, staring at his brother. My sisters were both talking at once. Melissa was crying, looking at Vanessa with betrayal written all over her face. Trevor had his arm around Melissa, looking completely overwhelmed. Vanessa was sobbing, saying, I'm so sorry," over and over. Gregory found his voice finally. "Helen, please, not like this. We can talk about this privately." "No," I said, and my voice cut through the noise like a knife. "You don't get privacy. You don't get dignity. You had 35 years of my trust and loyalty, and you spent it planning your exit with a woman young enough to be your daughter, a woman who was a guest in our home, a woman who betrayed my daughter's trust and friendship." I looked at Vanessa, who was shaking, tears streaming down her face. "You need to leave. Now." She stood, stumbling, and practically ran for the door. Melissa didn't try to stop her. She was still crying, but she was looking at her father with something like disgust on her face. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking. "My roommate? Really?" Gregory tried to reach for her, but she pulled away. I looked at everyone at the table. "I'm sorry that Christmas dinner is ruined. I'm sorry you all had to witness this, but I won't apologize for the truth. I deserve better than to be lied to. I deserve better than to be replaced by someone my daughter's age. And I deserve to spend my holidays with people who actually value honesty and loyalty." I picked up the folder and walked out of the dining room. I went upstairs to my bedroom and closed the door. I could hear the chaos downstairs, raised voices, doors closing, the sound of people leaving. I sat on the edge of my bed and waited. About an hour later, there was a soft knock on my door. "Mom?" Melissa's voice. "Come in, honey." She came in, eyes red from crying, and sat next to me. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, "How long have you known?" "Since your birthday weekend," I said. "I came to surprise you early and saw them together at your apartment." Melissa's face crumpled. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I would never. Vanessa was my friend. I trusted her. I can't believe she and Dad." "I know, honey. Neither could I. Why didn't you tell me right away?" "Because I needed to think clearly," I said. "I needed to gather the facts. I needed to protect myself and my future, and I needed to decide how to handle it on my terms, not his." Melissa nodded slowly. That was pretty brutal down there. Yes, I said. It was. Good, Melissa said fiercely. He deserved it. They both did. We sat together for a while longer, mother and daughter, holding hands in the quiet of Christmas evening. Downstairs, eventually, everyone left. Gregory left too. Martin drove him somewhere, a hotel probably. I didn't care where he went. The next morning, I called Patricia and told her to file the divorce papers. She did that afternoon. The property settlement took 4 months to finalize. I got the house, a significant portion of the savings, and half of Gregory's pension. Gregory got the Toronto condo and his freedom. We sold our cottage up north and split the proceeds. Melissa cut off contact with Vanessa completely. She got a new roommate, a grad student named Priya, who she says is lovely and trustworthy. She and I are closer now than we've ever been. Gregory and Vanessa are still together, as far as I know. I don't ask. I don't care. They're welcome to each other. I'm 64 now. I've been divorced for 8 months. I'm seeing a therapist who's helping me process 35 years of a marriage that wasn't what I thought it was. I'm learning to trust my instincts again. And I'm learning something else, that choosing yourself isn't selfish, that demanding honesty isn't cruel, that exposing the truth, even when it's ugly and painful, is sometimes the only way to move forward. Some people have said I was too harsh, that I humiliated Gregory unnecessarily, that I could have handled it privately. But here's what I learned. Gregory was planning to humiliate me. He was planning to divorce me after taking what he wanted from our marriage, after setting up his new life, after positioning himself for maximum advantage. He was planning to rewrite our history to make himself look like a man who'd simply fallen out of love, not a cheater who'd betrayed every vow we'd made. The only difference is that I exposed him before he could execute his plan. I'm not proud of ruining Christmas dinner. I'm not proud of causing a scene in front of my family and friends, but I'm not ashamed either. Because the truth is this, I didn't ruin Christmas. Gregory did, when he started sleeping with my daughter's roommate, when he bought a secret condo, when he planned his exit strategy while still sleeping in my bed and kissing me goodnight. I just made sure everyone knew it. Would I have done things differently if I could go back? Maybe. Maybe I would have confronted him privately, filed for divorce quietly, let him leave with some dignity intact. Or maybe I wouldn't have, because something happens when you discover that your entire life has been a lie. Something breaks and something else hardens. You realize that playing by the rules only matters if everyone else is playing by them too. Gregory wasn't playing by the rules, so neither did I. The lesson I've learned, the one I'd tell anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation: you are not obligated to protect the reputation of someone who destroyed your trust. You are not required to keep their secrets. You are not responsible for their dignity when they've shown you none. The truth is not cruel. Lying is cruel. Betrayal is cruel. Deception is cruel. The truth is just the truth, and everyone deserves to know it. I'm rebuilding my life now. I've joined a book club. I've started taking watercolor painting classes. I'm planning a trip to Scotland next spring with my sister Caroline. I'm learning who I am as Helen Patterson, not as Mrs. Gregory Patterson, not as someone's wife, just as myself. And you know what? I like her. I like the woman I'm becoming. She's stronger than I thought she was. She's braver. She doesn't apologize for taking up space or demanding respect or expecting honesty. Would I have chosen this? No. Would I have preferred that Gregory had been faithful, that we'd grown old together as planned, that our marriage had been real? Of course, but that wasn't the choice I was given. The choice I was given was this: accept the lie or expose it, protect his narrative or tell my truth, suffer in silence or speak out loud. I chose the truth. I chose my voice. I chose myself. And I would do it again.